Learn Engineering. My name is Leslie. Today we are going to talk about something called SQL or SQL, and we'll talk about why it's important and what it is. So if you've watched our previous video on relational databases, this will probably make more sense. So if you haven't watched that yet, I definitely recommend you go off and do that now. And then this will kind of lead on from there. If you already know a lot about relational databases, then that's great. So relational databases are a way to store structured data. It used to be that any data that a company was storing used to be in a filing cabinet in an office. And for any younger people that haven't seen a filing cabinet, it's basically a big box with drawers, and people would store all their data in there. It was all on paper. It was all very manual. We didn't have databases. And that might still work for some small businesses, possibly, but for most companies now it doesn't, and there's way too much data to do that. And now we use these digital databases. We use these kind of relational databases. So they're like a digital file cabinet, I guess. And we can't sift through a database in the way we might with a filing cabinet. There's too much data. It's far too much. So we use something called structured query language, or SQL. Some people call it SQL, some people call it SQL. Both are the same thing. It's just two different names for it. And this is like a kind of go between. So this is a language that we understand as people, and it is a language that the database will also understand, and it will know what we're trying to do. So with a SQL command, it allows us to do anything we need to on a database, and access the information in there. So the relational database understands anything written in SQL. And any SQL commands that we have fit into this CRUD operation. So CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. I can nearly type. So it stands for create, read, update, and delete. Anything that we want to do in a database will fall into one of these. So we might want to create the database. We might want to create a table within it. We might want to create the foreign key or the primary key and create that relationship. We might want to create data, whereby we're inserting data into that table. We might want to create a view or a procedure or something like that. So anything we want to create in a database will be a create operation. Read is basically us looking at the information that's already in our database and maybe returning it in a certain format, or maybe returning information from a couple of different tables and putting it together in a way that makes sense for us. But any getting information out of a database or a table is a read operation. Update can be updating the database, updating a view in the database. It could be updating the table, maybe adding a column, or an attribute, if you like. It could be adding, updating the data that's already in it. It could be adding primary keys, foreign keys, anything like that. Any update that we want to do is that update operation. And then delete. We can delete primary keys, we can delete foreign keys, we can delete views, we can delete data out of the table, we can delete the whole table, or if we want to, we can delete the whole database. Be careful doing that. Make sure you're deleting what you want to. So I'll show you a couple of very simple kind of CRUD operations and what they look like in SQL. So there's some different flavors of SQL. The flavor of SQL that I will be writing in is something called T-SQL. There are some different flavors, as I've said. The basic commands are the same, but the syntax is slightly different. And the syntax of a language is the kind of rules for that language. So each language that we speak as humans, English, Malaysian, French, whatever, they all have their own rules. And that could be, say French, everything has a feminine or masculine, and the tense that they use is a certain way, and things like that. And then English, can be, it has its own um, rules, or around how it works and things like that. So programming languages are the same. With programming languages, it's maybe how the keyword is spelt, or where the brackets are put, or if we have colon or semicolon or something like that. So if you're using a different version of SQL, you will be able to use these types of commands, but you'll probably have to change it to fit the syntax a little bit. Which is, a bit of a long-winded way to say I'm doing T-SQL. Your mileage may vary, basically. So if we have a look at a kind of create, so we might want to say create database and call it my database. If we ran that in SQL, we would get a database created. This is a very simplified, kind of. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this. I just want to give you guys a bit of a kind of small flavor. So we can create our database. We might want to create a table, and we will give it a table name, my table, and then we will have to tell SQL what the columns are that we want that table to have and what they look like. So we might want to create a table with three columns, three attributes. So we would have to give SQL the names of those attributes. So ID, name, first name, last name. We'd have to say what length they're going to be, how many characters they have, if they're an integer, if they're a varchar, anything like that. So with the table, we have to give it all of that information. We can create primary keys, we can create foreign keys, we can do all that kind of stuff. With a read, they all start with something called select. So if I said select star from, and then I give it a table name, say I had a table name called student, what this would do would be select every single row and every single column from that table and display it for me. So I might want to maybe only have a certain couple of columns. So I might want to say select first name, last name for that student. I just want to see their names, and then I want to say from student. So that would be me just selecting a couple of different columns, and you'll see the keywords in SQL here. So this like select, the from, things like that, they're normally in capitals. With SQL, it's not case sensitive in that way that they have to be like that, but it's good practice so that we can all kind of read it. Our code is then quite readable. So that would select just a couple of columns, but say I wanted to select everything from a table where a student had a particular name, maybe their last name is a particular thing. So I might then say select star, because I want to select every single column from student. And then I say where, say last name equals Jones. Right. So something like that would then only give me the rows of that table where the student's last name is Jones. So that's a way of us to kind of select and to kind of narrow down our selection, and just maybe select certain columns or certain rows. We can do the same with the delete as well. So say I wanted to delete everything from that table, so I could say delete star from student. I'm finding it hard to type, apologies. Where and we probably want to just have a certain student ID, we probably want to delete one row. So we could delete it using the same kind of thing. So delete everything from the student table where their ID matches what we've given you. So 19 in this case. If I had just typed in something like delete star from student, what that would do is delete everything from that table, every single row. Now the table is intact, the names of the columns are intact, the types of columns, whether they're storing integers or text or anything like that, all of that is still intact, but there would be no data in that database at all. So a lot of times we don't want to do that. We want to use the where clause for those delete. So that would be our kind of delete way of narrowing that down. We can delete a table, so we can just delete and then the table name that we want to delete. We could delete the whole database, so say delete and then the database name. We can do anything like that. Say we wanted to, so I know up here we talked about creating. Say I wanted to create some new records in my table. So I've created a table called student. I've given it the column names that I have. I want to insert some data in there. So my thing would look something like this. Insert into, and then I give it the table name. And I have the column names as well. So ID, first name, last name, something like that, right? And then I say values. These are the values that I'm going to actually specifically insert. So their ID could be 23. You'll notice that if we have an integer, we don't need to put the quote marks around it. But if it's their first name, I do. So say Will. And then their surname could be Graham. And that would insert that row with those details into that table. So that's how we create data in our table. So we've looked at creating a table, creating a database, creating some data in it, so inserting something. We've looked at reading. We've had a bit of a look at deletion as well, and how important it is to use that where clause to narrow down our search for what we want to delete. But we might also want to update. So with the update, we have an update keyword. We will say then what we want to update. So it could be a table, it could be a primary key, it could be something like that. And then we tell it what we want to update. So we might want to update certain, column names. We might want to update data. We might want to update anything like that. We can also use the where clause. So say I wanted to update a particular student. Say they've moved house, they've changed their address. So I use update and I say what the table is. So student table. I want to update their address. So I want to update their house number, street name, town, postcode. I want to give it those new values. I also want to use that where clause again. The where clause is so helpful for us because it narrows it down. So I can say update all that where student ID equals whatever it is. So say Will Graham, student ID 23 has moved house. We would then say where student ID equals 23, and we just update his address. If we didn't use that where clause, what would happen is that it would update the address of every single student in that table. So everyone would live at the same address, which obviously is not that useful. That's never going to happen for an address, but it might be useful for something else. It's possible that sometimes you do want to do that. So everything we do in a database, in a relational database, will fit into these kind of CRUD operations. So this has been a little bit of a whistle-stop tour into SQL. There is a lot of different things that you can do. They all fit into these simple CRUD operations. And we can do anything we want with that database using these 4 types of operations. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something. If you haven't watched our video on the relational databases that we also have, I definitely recommend that you go and watch it. It's going to make a lot more sense. and hopefully we'll see you again with another video. Thanks very much for watching.